Lothian is closed each way over the Tyne Bridge between Haddington and Dunbar. The M1 in Derbyshire down to a single lane northbound for emergency repairs between junctions 28 and 29 near Mansfield. It's taking around an hour in queues towards there. The M48 Severn Bridge is closed westbound from England into Wales because of strong winds. Diversions via the M4 over the Prince of Wales Bridge, and the M25 in Kent's blocked anti-clockwise after an accident and fuel spill between junctions 3 and 2 from the M20 to the A2 with queues in both directions.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We were talking earlier about the issue of Siri listening to you. Well, it's not just your own conversations being sort of harvested for data, but it's a problem with AI. So what seems to have happened yesterday is that Apple issued a alert saying that Luke Littler had won the darts before he had. I mean, imagine what would, if he then gone on to lose, how that would have looked. I mean, obviously, because he went on to win, at least they got the story right, but before it had happened. So what it seems to happen is that the AI farms existing stories, and what it has done, that's the alert. We can see the alert there now, and it also claiming that Brazilian tennis player Rafael Nadal had come out as gay when actually a different Brazilian tennis player was actually mentioned in the original story. So what it does is you see that it's branded as BBC Sport. What the Apple AI system does is it farms alerts that it thinks people are getting from the source and then summarises them into one. That's going to be my question. Into one alert.
It looks to me like you would assume, OK, the BBC are reporting this.
Absolutely. So the BBC
News might be saying something else.
So it could happen to any news organisation.
This has highlighted a massive issue. I mean, having editorial judgment and quality control, because if this is going on, it's just contributing to the flow of misinformation. Yes. And we know that this is a problem on social media, people reporting false things. But if it seems to come from trusted news sources, that is a massive issue in credibility. I mean, if you had something like Reuters, who's a big news provider, doing this, you could hold people accountable, you could make changes, but when it's the AI doing it, I mean, what do? You're going to have to reprogram it in some way.
And if you just lost control, if you're a news source, you've lost control of what goes out, because it basically farms it, puts your logo on it and sends it out, even when it's nonsense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good morning to you. Hope you're well. It's 9:30 on Friday, January the 24th. Live across the UK, this is Britain's Newsroom with me, Ben Leo, and Miriam Cates.
Well, we'll be asking, has justice been served to the Southport killer, Axel Rudikubana?
Sentence him to custody for life with a minimum term which he must serve in custody of 52 years, less the time he's served already.
52 years behind bars for the horrific murders of the 3 little girls in Southport. Chief Crown Prosecutor Sarah Hammond gave her reaction to the case.
Many of the cases that we deal with have tragedy, difficulties and trauma, but this is one of the most harrowing that I, as the Chief Crown Prosecutor for this area, have ever come across.
Well, Reform UK MPs Rupert Lowe and Lee Anderson have called for the return of the death penalty. So we'll be asking if it's time to bring it back for cases like the Southport murders, or would this be a step backwards for our society?
Elsewhere, Storm Eowyn batters Britain as a danger to life warning is issued by the Met Office.
New records of wind speeds of 114 miles an hour, 93,000 homes without power. Storm Eowyn has doing its worst and continues as it heads towards Scotland.
And a shock new report finds that children are 50 times more likely to suffer from so-called gender distress than a decade ago. More on that to come.
And the Mazda MX-5 RF convertible has been named as Britain's most loved car in an official survey. Do you agree with that? What's your pick? And talking of great Brits,
we shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
It's 60 years today since Sir Winston Churchill died, and will we ever see a leader like him in Britain? Again, how would he fare in the current political landscape?
Thank you for your company this morning. Miriam, nice to be back with you.
Yes, been a long time.
Apparently you have a Mazda MX-5.
I do have an MX-5, but it's not one of those swanky new ones. It's a Mark 1. It was made in 1991, so it's pretty old now. It's actually not on the road. I hope to be able to share a picture later. I've just asked my husband to send one through. But it was our only car for quite a long time, and the boot is tiny. You can basically fit 2 shopping bags in, that's it.
Nice.
We've travelled all around Europe in it, so it's quite
I think
fun.
German cars and Japanese cars like Mazdas, they're meant to be the most reliable, aren't they? What was your first car?
That was probably the first car that I kind of co-owned. I had a very old battered Renault Clio that cost me 600 quid when I was a trainee teacher. That was quite useful.
Mine was a Honda Civic.
Oh, very nice.
Back in the day, yeah, another Japanese car. So, let us know what you think about cars. The Mazda MX-5, is it Britain's most beloved? What about the Jaguars? British made?
Yes, that's true. Although it said, I think the least favourite car is a particular type of Range Rover that costs lots of money. Anyway, we're going to be discussing that later.
A Range Rover Evoque.
One of those squashed ones, yes.
There we go. Well, that's what happens when you export your production to Tata in India. Big show coming up, including the debate over the death penalty and the horrors from Southport and all the court action yesterday. Let us know your views, gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ben, Miriam, thank you. The top stories. Schools, rail services and hospitals are all set to be affected today when Storm Erwin slams the UK. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland have received emergency alerts from the Met Office with guidance on how to stay safe. A wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began, according to the forecaster. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. Train operator ScotRail has suspended all services across Scotland today, saying it wouldn't be safe to operate. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 little girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack at that dance class in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alistair Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Dot Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to his age at the time of the attack, Rudakabana cannot legally receive a whole-life order, a punishment reserved for offenders aged 21 or over, or, in rare cases, those aged 18 to 20. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Rudakabana did not get a whole-life sentence because international law prevented it.
The technicality of the whole-life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry, now the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
And a woman whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to Sainsbury's will be sentenced later. Devika Rose had left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out in the evening in December 2021. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter following trial. Rose and the children had been living in squalor before the tragedy. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Ben Leo and Miriam Cates.
Morning to you. Thank you for your company this morning. There's only one place to start today. The Southport killer, Axel Rudabakana, has been jailed for life with a minimum term in prison of 52 years.
Well, we'll be giving our thoughts on that in just a moment. But first, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this report.
That's it, yeah, it's down there. It's down there.
In the back of a local taxi, this is Southport killer Axel Rudabakana, just moments before he shattered the innocence of a children's dance class in the most horrific way imaginable. There would be no payment for the driver from this violence-obsessed teenager as he suddenly jumps out of the taxi, making his way towards the entrance of the Heart Space venue. It's so incredibly heartbreaking to watch these images as in the background music can clearly be heard from the Taylor Swift themed dance class inside, as the youngsters here had no idea of the evil about to enter their world. 3 of those innocents were murdered. 8 others and 2 adults injured in a sustained stabbing attack that left even the most experienced first responders completely traumatised.
Yeah, the events that took place on the 29th of July last year were just truly horrific. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. You know, whilst we've heard the sentencing this week of Axel Rudabakana, which is positive, you know, my thoughts remain with the families of Elsie, Bibi and Alice, the other girls and adults that were injured and those that have been traumatised by what they saw on that day. Just truly horrific.
This is the same model as the chef's knife Rudabakana bought on Amazon and used in the attack. Although he refused to speak to investigators, he was overheard on an audio recording, muttering to himself in police custody, saying he was glad the young girls were dead and satisfied he'd achieved what he set out to do. Multiple failings by state agencies have only served to compound the grief and the anger of the bereaved families and the wider community. Aged just 13, this twisted and violent young man began taking knives to school. He admitted to doing this on 10 separate occasions. He openly bragged of his desire to carry out a school massacre. But despite 3 separate referrals to the Prevent Counter-Extremism programme, no action was taken.
Axel Rudabakana first became known to Children's Social Care in 2019, following referrals from the police into the multi-agency Safeguarding Hub. A strategy discussion, which is a multi-agency meeting involving key professionals, in this case social work, early help, police, health and education, met to plan actions and share information following the attack that took place in the school.
This is Rudabakana near his Lancashire home a week before the Southport attack, calling a taxi with the likely intention of carrying out an attack at his former high school. His father intervened and begged the taxi driver not to drive him there. It's not known exactly what his family knew about his attack plans and whether any of them could face prosecution. But at the family home, police discovered paraphernalia used by the teenager to make the deadly biological toxin ricin, a quantity of which was found in this Tupperware box. A PDF document with information linked to an Al-Qaeda training manual was also found within days of the attack. Yet it took 3 months before authorities finally revealed to the public he would also face a terror charge and biological weapons charge. Those charges came months after the widespread disorder, fueled by anger and suspicion that the public were not being told key facts about the suspect. The Prime Minister and others have admitted facts were withheld. Police said they wanted to reveal more information to help counter public misinformation, but were prevented from doing so by the Crown Prosecution Service. The CPS said to do otherwise could have led to the collapse of the case.
we felt that the risk of putting any detailed information, more than we put out already, could prejudice that fair trial. And given that our priority was to make sure that justice was done, that's why we made the decisions that we did.
Axel Rudikabana is now firmly behind bars, having shown absolutely no remorse. Bereaved families will never fully recover, and public trust in the authorities to tell them the truth in future has been badly dented. Mark White, GB News, Merseyside.
Wow, it's been a really emotional 24 hours hearing the remarks yesterday in court from the judge and the sentencing, hearing the reports from reporters who were there, such as Mark White, Sophie Reaper. Has justice been served, Miriam?
Can it ever be served in a case like that? Obviously, you can't bring back those little girls. You can't erase the fact that it's happened. It's difficult to know what justice looks like. He's unlikely ever to come out of prison. He'll be in his 70s when he's even eligible for release. Will he live that long? I mean, I don't know. There is, you know, you can't make right what has happened, but he has received the longest possible sentence that is available under our law.
What about the death penalty?
I have mixed feelings about the death penalty. I think our sentences are far too low for some appalling crimes. I mean, look at the rape gangs that we've been talking about so much since Christmas. You know, some of those men were jailed for just 2 or 3 years, some not at all. And many countries in the world, raping a child, you'd be hung, no question about it. So I do think there is a case for it, for some of the most heinous crimes. But on the other hand, we do know there can be miscarriages of justice. And, you know, the American system, it is hardly a beacon of light when it comes to use of the death penalty.
Yeah, I just think in cases like this, where it's nailed on, he's pled guilty, he was literally caught red-handed, I don't think it serves anybody to keep him in prison at taxpayers' expense. What is it, 50, 60k a year maybe? Up to 90, the figure has been suggested. And when I was a bit younger, I'm not particularly religious, and I'm going to get a bit deep now, but I didn't used to think there were evil people. I just used to think people were mentally ill or a bit damaged from their own experiences in childhood. I've now concluded in the last couple of years, I think evil walks amongst us. I think people like that cretin there, who I'm not going to name, is a demon. And I don't think he should be able to live in prison at our expense and live another day.
See, I would say that evil is real. And one of the problems with this case and the grooming gangs is that we've been forced to confront the reality of evil. But I don't think people are either good or evil. I think we all have tendencies to go either way, and so much of it depends on our experiences, our childhood. That doesn't excuse anybody. We've all got a choice. But if you look at, for example, what happened in Nazi Germany, millions of ordinary people committed horrific crimes because they were gradually brainwashed. It was normalised. They saw what other people were doing, and they weren't brave enough to stand up against evil.
I've been reading
and
interesting...
all human beings have got, unfortunately, the tendency to do both.
Yeah, I was reading a interesting book. Is it Ordinary Men? About from the Second World War, the Nazi regime, how ordinary men, politicians, journalists, solicitors, doctors, they all formed this. They were told to form this kill squad, basically, their Nazi kill squad, and it delved into the psychology of how they got to that point. These were normal people. And as you said, it was the peer pressure. Some of them refused to kill Jews. They were ostracised, and it was the social pressure. But I think in this case, this monster who committed the horrors at Southport, I don't think it's really comparable. I think he's a demonic, he's satanic.
Is it though? Because
he needs to be rid of this earth, and taxpayers need to be spared the expense.
He first came into contact with the authorities in 2019, aged 13. He's a little boy. How had he come across the kind of evil that we know he was already looking at on the internet? Had he never encountered that kind of extreme content? Had he never been able to get hold of a jihadi manual? Had he never been able to find out how to make ricin, like, you know, children 50 years ago weren't able to find that? Would he have been tempted by the kind of evil that, yes, I agree, has now possessed him? That, you know, those are the kind of questions. That doesn't, again, absolve him of the hideous crimes, but I just don't think it's true. Some people are born good and some people are born evil. I think it's a lot.
I do now. That's what I've concluded. I think you aren't human. It's not human behaviour to do that. And also the conversation now, apart from paying tribute to the poor girls and the other victims we heard about yesterday, is The authorities, the Prevent scheme, the social workers, Keir Starmer's actions in the wake of the incident last summer, where he threw some flowers down at the scene in Southport and then went off to a Labour-lovey donor drinks celebration at Downing Street. And, you know, yesterday he said it was the worst atrocity Britain's ever suffered. Well, he clearly didn't think that at the time. He went and donated tens of millions of pounds of our money to mosques to make them feel safe. And then soon after that, went and called for the banging up of far-right thugs, many of who were just normal, concerned, worried, frightened Brits, and some who are now still in prison. So there's so many questions still. This isn't over. This isn't over as far as I'm concerned.
Let's hope that the inquiry does actually get to the bottom of some of these questions. Well, up next, our reporters are being battered by Storm Eowyn. But first, if you or anybody you know is in search of some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of our top European holiday destinations.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe. This includes Portugal, Spain and parts of northwest France. We're likely to see some heavy rain, also some strong winds at times. Largely settled across Tenerife, but Madeira, parts of Portugal, Spain, northwestern France could see some showers merging into longer spells of rain at times and also some strong winds. As we head further east, largely settled across Rome and also parts of Greece, but a chance we could see some showers here as we head into next week with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And fashionistas are keen to see which new trends are set to hit the catwalk.
Well, our next guest is very well placed to share her predictions with us after being a contestant on hit ITV series Dress the Nation, as well as being an upcycling and sewing consultant.
Wow. Joining us now is Tendai Murawe. I want to go back to you appearing on the ITV Dress the Nation.
Right.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
Oh, that was one of my highlights as a upcycling consultant. I learned to sew in my kitchen 5 years ago. And then, during COVID, just making masks. Then the next thing I was on a Dress the Nation, making dresses in front of TV. Yeah, it was just incredible. I think we all had all these clothes that we have, but we don't know what to do with them. So mainly I started with men's jackets, taking off the sleeves and putting it like a print on.
I've tried this. I've tried taking off my sleeves before. I now have about 3 jackets with no sleeves. I never managed to put them back on.
You need to come to a workshop. You need to come to a workshop.
I need an upcycling consultant. 2025, what can we expect fashion-wise?
I think bold prints are back. People are loving. I think you walk on the streets in frollals and oversized men's jackets.
So the exact opposite. We have drastically underperformed this morning. You're just saying not like us.
We just woke up this morning and thought it's winter, it's cold, it's grey.
Grey, miserable.
Is that not the way to go?
No, it is. It's still, I think because fashion is expressive. It's whatever you want to express yourself.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. We're just trying to establish what the correct pronunciation is for this new storm. Storm Eowyn, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they choose
Eowyn?
the most difficult to pronounce names possible.
Anyway, the big storm, Storm Eowyn, I'm going to call it. It's hit as forecasters flag a rare threat to life, red weather warning.
Well, with us now for the latest is GB News Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie and Scotland reporter Tony Maguire. Well, shall we start with Dougie? You're looking rather windswept, Dougie. I hope you didn't spend too much time doing your hair this morning. What's the latest in Northern Ireland?
Well, this storm hit the Republic of Ireland at about 2 o'clock this morning. Met Earn telling us that they have a new record for wind speeds across the country of 114-mile-an-hour gusts. It has done substantial damage throughout the Republic before moving northward. It hit us here in Northern Ireland at about 5 o'clock this morning, got up to its real peak at about 7. There is 93,000 homes without power, substantial damage to properties and trees down, bringing basically chaos. Now, the schools have been closed in Northern Ireland ahead of this, and most shops, etc., are also closed. Believe it or not, the wind is actually starting to calm here now. I'm standing in Donaghadee Harbour. You can see, but just outside the harbour walls here, the sea, Irish Sea, is very, very rough, and that has meant cancellations of sailings.
Great stuff. And Tony, you're in Scotland, which I think is about to bear the brunt of this storm, if not already.
Yes, that's right. Well, certainly I'm here in Troon, which just sits on the cusp of the Ayrshire coast. And already, I'm not sure if you can hear it behind me, but the surreal whistling of the winds as they pass through here. I said earlier, we obviously don't have hurricanes, or they don't call them hurricanes here in the UK, but certainly this is as close as it's going to come. The trees behind me, ironically palm trees, painting that picture that we quite often see from the southern of United States, and it's only going to get worse as the morning goes on.
Tony, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Now, if that wasn't enough weather for you, here's a forecast to see what it's like in your area. Stay safe.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Eowyn is set to bring a very unsettled day with very strong winds in places where we have multiple Met Office warnings in force, including 2 red warnings. These are covering Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland, where we're likely to see the strongest of the winds, could see up to 100 miles per hour here. It's going to be a windy day across the country, multiple warnings in force. Stay up to date on the Met Office website for those. Most of the rain clearing southern and central areas by the afternoon, becoming largely confined to the far north, where we see outbreaks of very heavy rain at times, also some snow mainly across the Scottish Highlands. Temperatures round about average for the time of year, but those strong winds are set to continue, particularly as we head into the evening. Lightning off across parts of the south, but in areas of the north we'll continue to see those heavy outbreaks of rain. Still some outbreaks of snow, mainly across hills, but we could see some to lower levels too. Very strong winds set to continue, particularly around coastal areas, but the rain set to ease across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England too. And once again across central and southern UK, most of the rain becoming fairly confined to the very far south east. But into the evening we could start to see some showers feed into western spots. Still the heavy rain continuing, becoming confined to the very far northeast of Scotland. We will eventually see winds ease away across central and southern areas, parts of northern England and Northern Ireland too. Winds will begin to ease, and we'll see plenty of clear spells, so likely to turn rather chilly overnight, may even wake up to some pockets of frost. Still extremely windy across northern areas though, where we'll still have warnings in force as we head into Saturday for a time, but on the whole it's likely to be a slightly more settled day compared to Friday. Saying that though, we are eventually going to see some showers start to move in from the west. These could be quite heavy at times with some hail, also some thunder. May even see some winteriness across the hills as these move in, but across the very far east and southeast likely to remain dry and lighter winds compared to Friday.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel. Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Cairngorms, the A93 is closed each way between Braemar and the Spittal of Glen Shee because of snow. There's widespread disruption this morning too because of the storms, with a number of roads either closed because of strong winds or blocked by fallen trees. The A1 is closed each way where a lorry's overturned in the wind between Dunbar and Coburn's Path, and the A1's closed each way over the Tyne Bridge between Haddington and Dunbar because of strong winds. There are a number of train lines blocked too, and sailings cancelled. On the M1 in Derbyshire, there's a lane closed northbound for emergency repairs just before the tip shelf services between junctions 28 and 29 near Mansfield, taking 40 minutes in queues from junction 27 at Hucknall. And the M25 in Kent's closed anti-clockwise between junctions 3 and 2 from the M20 to the A2 after an accident and fuel spill, with queues each way from junction 4 and from junction 2.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing. Just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 a.m. on Friday the 24th of January. We're live across the United Kingdom. You're watching Britain's Newsroom with Ben Leo and Miriam Cates.
Has justice been served to the Southport killer, Axel Rudabakana?
Sentence him to custody for life, with a minimum term which he must serve in custody of 52 years, less the time he's served already.
Well, Axel Rudabakana has been given 52 years behind bars for the horrific murders of those 3 little girls in Southport. Chief Crown Prosecutor Sarah Hammond gave her reaction to the case.
Many of the cases that we deal with have tragedy, difficulties and trauma, but this is one of the most harrowing that I, as the Chief Crown Prosecutor for this area, have ever come across.
Well, although the judge, Mr. Justice Goose, said that it was his belief that Axel Rudabakana would die in prison, the very possibility that he could eventually be up for parole has many people now calling for a change in the law.
And what do you make of this? Reform UK MPs Rupert Lowe and Lee Anderson have both backed the death penalty. So we'll debate if it's time to bring it back for cases like this, or is it a step backwards for society?
And as Storm Eowyn batters Britain as a danger to life warning is issued by the Met Office.
I'm here on the Ayrshire coast where the red weather warning for Scotland starts now, 10 o'clock till 5 p.m. this afternoon, up to 100-mile-an-hour gusts set to batter the centre and lower part of Scotland. Join me as we discuss more in this hour.
And a shock new report finds that children are 50 times more likely to suffer from so-called gender distress than a decade ago. Just what the hell is going on?
And the Mazda MX-5 RF convertible has been named as Britain's most loved car in an official survey. Do you agree with that? And talking of great Brits...
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Oh, how we long for a leader like Sir Winston. It's 60 years today since he died. Will we ever see a leader like him again in Britain? And how would he fare in the current political landscape?
Well, Churchill was an extraordinary leader, wasn't he? And any time that we have these surveys of who was the greatest Briton ever, he always tops the charts. But I just don't know how he'd fare in the political landscape today. I mean, he smoked a lot of the cigars. He drank champagne at breakfast. I mean, that lifestyle wouldn't stand up to social media.
Reminds me of Nigel Farage. He likes a ciggy and a nail. I think, the youngsters and universities and all the woke lefty liberals, they would paint Sir Winston as a racist, warmongering mass murderer. So he'd probably get some of that sort of nonsense today. But, I mean, as I said in the introduction, how we'd long for someone of his character and determination and steel and mettle.
And also, he had such a long career, as a lot of politicians did in those days. I mean, he was in the House of Commons for over 50 years, I think. And of course, the benefit of that experience and the wisdom that comes with time. I think the average MP serves for 8 years now. Not enough time to build up that kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'd love to hear what you think about Churchill and all the other topics we're discussing today. Please send your views and your comments to gbnews.com/yoursay. But first, here's the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you. The top stories this hour: schools, rail services and hospitals are all set to be affected today when Storm Eowyn slams the UK. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. A wind speed of up to 114 miles per hour has been brought by that storm, and that's been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began, according to the forecaster. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 little girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Ruda Cabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack at that dance class in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alice De Silva Aguirre, B.B. King and Elsie Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said that sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Ruda Cabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole life order, a punishment reserved for offenders aged 21 and over, or, in rare cases, those aged 18 to 20. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Ruda Cabana did not get a whole life sentence because international law has prevented it.
The technicality of the whole life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry, now the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
A woman whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to Sainsbury's will be sentenced later. Devika Rose had left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out in the evening in December 2021. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter following a trial. Rose and the children had been living in squalor before the tragedy. Now, a record number of children are living in B&Bs beyond the legal limit as England's homelessness crisis pushes councils to breaking point. MPs said there is a dire need for housing reform, with the lack of affordable homes forcing cash-strapped local authorities to hemorrhage their funds on temporary accommodation. Length of stay has increased significantly in many areas since 2021, with particularly long stays in London and the South East. The data shows 6,000 of these households included children, of which 2 in 3 had been living there for longer than the 6-week legal limit. And in sport, Novak Djokovic was booed off court by some Australian Open fans after retiring injured from his semi-final against Alexander Zverev, a win over Carlos Alcaraz. After the match, Djokovic said, "I did everything I possibly could do to manage the muscle tear that I had." He was also aiming for an all-time standalone record of 25 major titles. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Thank you, Tatiana, and good morning to you. It's 10:07. Ben and Miriam with you on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Thank you for your emails as well so far this morning. Let's start with Peter. Good morning. You said you keep wittering on about capital punishment, but the Southport killer, again, I don't want to name him, was under 18, so you're proposing to execute children. Well, he's 18 in about 8 or 9 days, as far as I remember. And yes, that's exactly what he did. He executed children. So as far as I'm concerned, an eye for an eye. Go for it.
Well, Les says, I remember the last state execution in 1964. There's something particularly cold-blooded about a hanging done in the name of the people. Ruda Cabana should swing, but what about Lucy Letby? Some question the evidence and even some think her innocent. I think that's one of the biggest arguments against it, isn't it? Is that in a miscarriage of justice, if someone's been in prison for a few years, they appeal and it's overturned, they can be released.
Yeah.
See, that can't be done.
But I think it should only be introduced. I mean, it never will be, of course, but I think it should only happen in cases, as I said, where it is absolutely nailed on. He's pled guilty. There's evidence, CCTV evidence. There's no question at all. Lucy Letby is slightly different. I don't buy into it, but there is this narrative that she's been hard done by, and there's a miscarriage of justice. So it's, you know, not as nailed on as I keep describing it as. And one more, you, a professional widow, you say, how dare the CPS say the case would collapse if too much info was released? This creature was bragging about it and there were witnesses to the event, open and shut case. It's interesting as well, just a very quick one before we move on. Keir Starmer said that he withheld information because he didn't want to prejudice a trial. This was last summer, shortly after the riots. Yet, during the riots and after the riots, he was labelling anybody who was there, even people on the sidelines who were just innocent bystanders who were subsequently banged up. He was labelling them as far-right thugs. So he was doing the same thing that he was insisting that he didn't want to do with this Southport case. It doesn't make sense.
There are some big questions to answer, and certainly a lot of senior lawyers have challenged this idea that calling the incident a terrorist incident or giving details about some of the things found in Ruda Cabana's room would have prejudiced the trial. A lot of senior lawyers challenging that. I'm sure that will come out in the inquiry. Well, just to recap on the case, the Southport killer, Axel Ruda Cabana, has been jailed for life with a minimum term in prison of 52 years. Now, this individual's punishment is thought to be the longest ever handed to a killer of his age.
Joining us now is GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White, who's live outside Liverpool Crown Court. Good morning, Mark. Thanks again for your company. What's the latest?
Morning. Well, of course, there are these growing calls for that change in the law because although the judge in this trial, of course, not gone to a full trial, but the sentencing that was passed yesterday by Mr. Justice Goose, he said that he would have sent Axel Ruda Cabana to jail for the rest of his life, given him a whole life sentence. But for those 9 days, he was 9 days short of his 18th birthday, and by the letter of the law, that option wasn't open to the judge, and I could sense his frustration and making that point that he would have used that option if he'd have been given the chance. So that's why he handed down the 52 years minimum term before he is even considered for parole. But he said in all likelihood it is his belief that he will never taste freedom again. But the thing is, even if there is the slightest possibility that that could happen, that is understandable that people don't want to contemplate that ever being the likely scenarios. So that's why they're looking perhaps for, if not a change in the law, then perhaps even that minimum term that he must served being increased even further to ensure that he would indeed never live long enough to be able to go before the parole board.
Mark White in Liverpool, thank you. Well, Reform MPs Rupert Lowe and Lee Anderson have backed bringing back the death penalty. So for cases as extreme as this one, should it be brought back?
Well, here to debate this now is the former Conservative MP Steve Baker and the Reform mayoral candidate for Greater Lincolnshire, Andrea Jenkins, three former colleagues in the same room this morning. Good morning to you all. Andrea, let's start with you. You think that the death penalty should be brought back in cases like this, don't you?
I do, yes, definitely. I mean, look, it should go to a public vote. I think that's important because it's such a contentious issue, isn't it, really? But I mean, what we've seen with those children murdered, and he would have gone on to murder more, is shocking. And cases like this, I know he's missed out on the life sentence because it was just before his 18th birthday. But I think for severe cases of murders of children, multiple murders where they've admitted guilt, like you said, Ben, I think it's the only way, because why should the British taxpayer give a penny to these evil, and to me, I don't want them on this earth. That's my view. And as a mother, just the mere thought of people like this in our society. And if you look at an interesting statistic, over 800,000 people apparently in Britain are a danger to children of sexual exploitation. That's one of the latest stats. So we do need to get tougher in Britain. I think we've been soft-touch Britain for too long. And yes, that's got to change.
Steve, what's your view?
Well, some cases are so serious they absolutely test our capacity for mercy, and this is one such case. And I'm very clear in my own mind that this man does not deserve to live, and that for what he's done, it would be an open and shut case if we had the death penalty in the UK. But the reason that we don't is because of our values, because it is a final sentence, because people are unjustly convicted and there's no recourse if they have been killed by the state. I thought your correspondents, your viewers made some very wise points about the sheer cold-blooded nature of the state killing people. I mean, the reason that the European Convention includes a protocol which was soberly adopted by nation-states, it's not from the jurisprudence, the reason it's in there is because of the long history of states taking the death penalty and using it to persecute people, to conduct purges and so forth. It's an extremely
but to me,
serious...
if they've admitted murdering like he did of innocent children, you know, what about their human rights? I don't care about the human rights of murderers. I care about the human rights of those children who have been murdered and the rights of their parents that they'll never ever see them again. That's what I think is important.
Well, as I said moments ago, I agree with you on that. He doesn't deserve his life. But the reason that we don't have the death penalty is because it doesn't work the way that people would want it to. I mean, you mentioned cost. In the USA, it costs far more to have the death penalty and to try somebody for death than it costs to put them in jail. And I think we should just reflect what it will mean for him to spend his life in jail, a minimum of 52 years before he can apply for parole. Now, obviously, I would prefer a whole life term along with his life sentence. It is a life sentence. I would prefer a whole life term, but the circumstances are what they are. But those decades are going to roll by slowly for that man, and I bet at times he will wish for death, and it will not come. And it's going to be a very cruel life for him, and rightly so.
Not as cruel as the parents, Steve, who got that life of grief, having to live life knowing that the person who murdered their beautiful children is still living. Yes, he might be living in prison, but he is still living. Their children do not get that chance.
Well, he will be living a life not worth living. But of course, as I say, if we were asking, does this man really deserve his life? The answer is no, he does not. I mean, the ECHR, when it gives its reasons, it uses highfalutin terms about the dignity of every life, which in general terms I agree with. I do respect the dignity of every person. But the reality is some people's crimes are so horrific that for the reasons you give, they do deserve death. But the reasons we don't kill them is because the death penalty doesn't work out the way that people think it does. That can be seen from the United States. It's more expensive than keeping them in prison. It can't be undone. People are unjustly sentenced to death when they're innocent, which is a terrible burden on everyone involved. Prison officers, the executioner.
That's why we need these checks and balances, and when they admit guilt themselves and the evidence is so substantial, that they are clearly the ones who murdered, then I think that's different.
It's an open question whether he would have pleaded guilty if the penalty was death. And I listened very carefully to the sentencing, and I noted that one of the reasons why the judge reduced the sentence, particularly in relation to the lesser charges, such as they are, was because he pleaded guilty, albeit late on the first day. Now, in practice with the death penalty, what's much more likely to happen is people pleading not guilty, even in such extreme circumstances, then putting all of the victims and their families through a lengthy trial, and then there's bifurcated trials in the US, so they're tried for guilt and then tried for the death penalty. And that means everyone involved has to go through all of that horror and misery twice. And then he goes on to death, and it's more expensive than putting him in prison. So, this really does speak to our values.
One of the arguments for the death penalty is not so much the justice element, but the deterrent element. And particularly thinking back to the Pakistani rape gang scandal, the fact that some of those men got only 3 years, 2 years in prison or not at all, whereas in some countries they would have had the death penalty, does indicate that perhaps our sentences or our justice system, as you said, Andrea, is just not strict enough. Do either of you think that there's a deterrent argument for the death penalty, even if perhaps there's not such a clear justice one?
I wonder if
sorry, Miriam, I completely agree with you. And look, you're both parents as well, aren't you? And I'm sure you, like me, with the grooming gangs as it's unfolded in the news. I mean, great with GBNews, the coverage of this, by the way. They really got to the nub and the heart of it. And as a parent, it just rips your heart out, doesn't it? And so I really do agree with you that, crimes like this, it does justify re-looking at what we do here in Britain and that it can be used as a deterrent. Because, I mean, look, we're going to see sort of a micro level looking at if there was any alleged cover-ups, etc. And maybe people wouldn't be even covering up such heinous crimes if they knew that this was a possibility. So
I think, if I may,
I'm afraid. Yes.
I'm not a parent, which I think Andrea knows, but I have cried my eyes out for these girls. I mean, my wife asked me, will you keep it together on TV in the morning? And I think I probably will, but it's by virtue of great effort.
Can I just say, Steve, I'm not saying that to... I know you personally, and you are sensitive guys. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from the perspective as a parent.
Yeah, of course, you're entitled to it. But the point really is that we can't take a decision like in this moment. The human body, the physiology of the body is set up as something called the amygdala, which kicks in, which makes us enraged, which makes us feel the way both Andrea and I do, I'm sure. And it's not a good moment to take this decision. We all need to just reflect really soberly on what it would mean for the state to adopt the institutions of execution. I've heard countless people now say they'd be willing to do it. What on earth? That means a culture of our country normalising killing. And this is not where we want to go as a country. History teaches us that you do not want to normalise in a society killing.
Well, the argument is, Steve, that's not the way we want to go as a country. We also don't want to go the way of Southport either. And something quite radical, I believe, needs to be done to...
Well, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
But can I mention, sort of like Miriam's point, like you said, Miriam, only getting 3 years for some of these grooming gangs. Is that not normalising, rape of children? So the whole system, I think, needs looking at. Yes, I get your point, Steve, that, it's very emotive at the moment. People are hurting across the country, and especially these parents. But it isn't going to stop people hurting, isn't going to stop these murders happening in the future. So I think we need to start looking into measures like this now and have a full investigation on what we can do.
So much more to say.
Oh, no. Well, thank you both for a very measured and thoughtful debate there.
Yeah, thank you, Steve Baker, Andrew Jenkins. Appreciate your company this morning. There is so much more to say. You can't condense that into a 5-minute conversation. Do you think we'll ever get a vote on capital punishment? It's just pie in the sky, really, isn't it?
The public polling, I think, from memory, is usually marginally in favour of the death penalty.
Oh, really?
But Parliament very much against, which is, you could say that on a lot of issues. But
interesting.
I think, as Steve said, we've got to reflect before reacting. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but perhaps now is not the moment to start it.
Well, maybe call me naive or reactionary, but I think paedophiles, child abusers, child rapists, that monster from Southport, they should all be swinging from a rope. So there we go. Moving on, Britain is being battered by Storm Eowyn. We're seeing pictures now here of planes battling wind at Birmingham Airport. There it is, one taking off. Not sure which airline. Goodness me. Are you an easy flyer, Miriam?
Yes, I actually love flying, but I might not if I was in that plane right now.
I've had some pretty tough turbulence before. It makes me laugh. Just it's the fact that it's the fear, I guess. I have a fearful laugh, and that's how I deal with the situation. But yeah, let us know what you think about the storm. And are you travelling today? Are you braving taking a plane somewhere abroad? gbnews.com/your say. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Ironic article in The Guardian, Nick, caring about facts.
Yeah, this is Meta is ushering in a world without facts, says Nobel Peace Prize winner. And they just seem to give these Nobel Peace Prizes to anyone these days. It's Maria Ressa.
Not working.
Zuckerberg came out, and it was very bold. He said a few things. We're going to use community notes instead of fact-checkers. Fact-checkers inverted commas, it just means people pushing usually a specific viewpoint. Community notes seems to be a great system that X uses, so why not do that? I think that's great. He's going to reduce restrictions on topics like immigration and gender. Good, because I'm against censorship. He's going to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more, which is great. He's also moving content moderation to Texas instead of California, which is banter. So now the cynical version is he's just realises we've got a new regime, it's the MAGA era, and I want to be mates with Trump, who said that I should that if I interfere with the 2024 election, he should spend the rest of his life in prison. So he did mention he might be a bit scared of that. He was involved in Facebook suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, and I feel that he didn't like being a part of all that from watching interviews.
And also the suppression of arguments about gender and sex, what is biological sex and whatnot. You get banned for saying there are two sexes.
They're on the wrong side of this, and now he's correcting. But the weird thing is the people, of course, the people who don't like this, the lefties, this person, Ressa, is saying that this is a big problem. That it's an extremely dangerous time. I've seen all this from the lefties. They just call it disinformation. They're worried about this because to them it's disinformation. To other people it's information.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think we can all agree if people think they're getting their facts just directly from Facebook, then something's horribly wrong. But we know that. The community notes thing, I think, is quite good because that sort of first-hand experience people are putting down, aren't they?
Yeah. People have loads of different views come together, and it's an aggregate. So that's why it works.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. 10:25, Ben and Miriam with you on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. And you may have just heard Dr. Renee Honderkamp as well talking as we came back on air. And we're also joined by Judita De Silva in the studio. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Hope you're well. Should we start with this one in the Times? Non-dom change in effort to stop exodus of millionaires. So the government is to amend, Judita, the controversial changes to tax rules for non-doms.
Yeah, so Rachel Reeves is at the World Economic Forum trying to drum up business and essentially change the impression people have of the landscape of the UK for doing business. And she said in her speech that she's not deaf to what the millionaires have been complaining about, because in the past year, I think over 10,000 have left the UK, which is a 157% increase. So it's kind of like a multi-pronged approach she seems to be having, but she's not very clear on everything. So we're waiting for the next speech, where it's saying that rather than doing everything so suddenly, they will graduate it over years for them to repatriate their assets to the UK. But then at the same time, what kind of business profits can they have? So that's why she's also gone against the regulators, because when you think about it, the regulators have been tightening their belts since 2008's financial crisis. And it's not so just rolling everything back, it's saying easing, because all you've done is gotten stricter and stricter. Ease back so people can do business, people with money come to invest in business. And then also the reasons that so many millionaires have left is because of not just the non-dom status, but also things like the increase in dominance of America and China in AI, also the depletion of the National Health Service. So it's a multi-pronged approach where they're saying they're going to try to attract people from the US who kind of don't want to work there anymore, from Europe who are not really getting the kind of support or, resources they need. So when you bolster the entire 360-degree landscape, it will be a better place to do business for millionaires.
And Renee, there's also been the freezing of the higher and the highest rates of tax, which of course have caught wealthy people, very much paying high rates of tax. People often say, oh, well, the rich should pay more tax. But there comes a level where it's just not worth earning extra money in the UK.
It's this juxtaposition that socialists have, isn't it? That they want to hate people that have done well, who have become millionaires, who actually are working here, and they want to punish them. And they say quite blasely that they don't care. Let them leave. Why do we need those kind of people if they're not loyal to our country? Well, the reason we need them is they pay most of our tax. Most of the tax in this country comes from higher earners. And Labour are now seeing the results of their policies. And every 45 minutes, a millionaire is leaving the UK. We can't afford for this to continue because eventually there will be no one left to pay the tax for the 54% of people in the UK who take more out of the system than they contribute.
Yeah, second only to China, I think, the exodus of millionaires, and they're going to the UAE, to the US. I'm trying to remember the graph I saw. Yeah, the UAE, Dubai, obviously, no tax.
Italy and Spain, I think, for probably other reasons.
And also the millionaires will find themselves in a catch-22 because the places that dominate, like your China, like your US, they can't go to, hence the choice of the UAE. So what the UK has is a unique opportunity, particularly with the new Trump administration, where if you make the UK more attractive, everybody would rather live at home if it's a good quality of life to have there. So if they play their cards right, even though it's a pivot from the policy they rode in on their white horse on, it's being reticent that you have to adapt to survive.
But doesn't that just mean as they adapt and change their policies, they're just becoming the same as the people that were here before? So we do have a uni party because these people were suddenly realising in power that actually what's in the textbooks about socialism and Marxism, I would even say, doesn't work in reality if you want a prosperous society.
No, but they're saying they're not going back on it. They're saying we're going to take our time to get there because right now they will make the extreme left in the party very upset.
Yes.
But this was a government that came into power on a centre-left basis. So they have to be kind of...
Softly.
Yeah, softly, exactly.
And sticking on the economics theme, of course, Trump coming in and threatening tariffs could inflict more harm on our economy if Britain's caught up in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, the government find themselves in a very difficult situation where they're having to have one foot on each fence because they want to do trade deals with America. They don't want to be victims of Trump's tariff impositions. But at the same time, if they jump into bed with the EU, that will just make those things impossible. And, when you keep a foot on either horse, you fall down the middle.
No, but at the same time, no one, to this day, I keep asking the question, based on the promises made for Brexit, what have you yielded? You have to be honest that there is a relationship that is necessary with EU, and it's based on economics. And also when you look at America and talk about the tariffs, America is America first, China is China first. If you don't begin to understand that, you've got one choice, particularly for the UK. The current government doesn't have a great relationship with the Trump administration. Trump has an issue with Europe. There is gravy on a plate for an alliance to happen because it is in both of your interests.
Yeah, but you've just demonstrated exactly what I've just said. The reason that Brexit has not worked is because we've tried to keep a foot on either horse. Stay close to the EU, don't quite Brexit, let's Brexit, and you fall down the middle. We've never implemented Brexit.
Well, we just haven't used the freedoms that we...
Exactly.
And actually, in some areas, we have decided to regulate even further than the EU has
But what
done.
I don't get is that Brexit was the big triumphant gain of Boris Johnson. That was a Tory thing, and they delivered on it. So how is it a situation where you're blaming Labour for being one foot? No, Labour is trying to deal with the landscape they've inherited. They weren't...
Well, lots of Labour voters voted for Brexit.
And
all those red wall
them,
seats, it wasn't just a Tory
A lot of them
Conservative
regret it now, because if you do look at the polls and they take the litmus test of how the country feels about Brexit, a lot of them say it didn't deliver on what we were...
No. Can I just politely correct you there? Brexit didn't fail to deliver. Politicians failed to deliver Brexit.
Yes.
They promised to control legal migration for starters. And what did Boris Johnson do? He allowed hundreds of thousands, a million a year, or over a couple of years, to come into this country legally. So it wasn't Brexit that failed to deliver. Politicians failed to deliver Brexit for the people.
If Boris had truly delivered Brexit, he would have done a no deal. That's what he would have done. He would have said, you know what, we're out. We are going to be, like America and China, as you said, all about us first. That's what we needed, and that's what we still need now. And that's why we're blaming Labour now, because they're the ones that can make that decision. They could make it tomorrow.
OK, but that's a point I'd like to take you up on when you say that, he did a soft Brexit, should have been a full Brexit. The whole point about when you get into office, you said it yourself, you realise just how difficult things are, and the original plan may not actually work. Yeah, OK. Judith De Silva, Dr Renee Honderkamp, thank you very much. You'll be back in the next hour. Time now for your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ben, thank you very much. The top stories: schools, rail services and hospitals are all set to be affected today when Storm Eowyn slams the UK. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. A wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began, according to the forecaster. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. Train operator ScotRail has suspended all services across Scotland today, saying it wouldn't be safe to operate. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack at that dance class in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alice De Silva Aguirre, B.B. King and Elsie Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudakabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order, a punishment reserved for offenders aged 21 and or over, in rare cases, those aged 18 to 20. Defence Secretary John Healey says Rudakabana did not get a whole-life sentence because international law has prevented it. And some breaking news. The Court of Appeal has ruled that the 3 judges who oversaw family court proceedings related to the care of Sarah Sharif can be named next week. A judge had earlier ruled they couldn't be named due to a real risk of harm to them from a virtual lynch mob. The media were previously allowed to report that Surrey County Council had concerns about Sarah's father, Irfan Sharif, as early as 2010, and that Sarah was involved in 3 sets of family court proceedings before she was murdered by Sharif and her stepmother, Bainash Batul, at their home in Surrey. Sharif and Batul were jailed for life for the 10-year-old's murder in December, with the minimum terms 40 years and 33. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, still to come, have you ever heard of gender distress? Find out why more children than ever are suffering from it. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Eowyn is set to bring a very unsettled day with very strong winds in places where we have multiple Met Office warnings in force, including 2 red warnings. These are covering Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland, where we're likely to see the strongest of the winds. Could see up to 100 miles per hour here. It's going to be a windy day across the country. Multiple warnings in force. Stay up to date on the Met Office website for those. Most of the rain clearing southern and central areas by the afternoon, becoming largely confined to the far north, where we see outbreaks of very heavy rain at times, also some snow mainly across the Scottish Highlands. Temperatures round about average for the time of year, but those strong winds are set to continue, particularly as we head into the evening. Lightening off across parts of the south, but in areas of the north we'll continue to see those heavy outbreaks of rain. Still some outbreaks of snow, mainly across hills, but we could see some to lower levels too. Very strong winds set to continue, particularly around coastal areas, but the rain set to ease across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England too. And once again across central and southern UK, most of the rain becoming fairly confined to the very far south east. But into the evening we could start to see some showers feed into western spots. Still the heavy rain continuing, becoming confined to the very far northeast of Scotland. We will eventually see winds ease away across central and southern areas, parts of northern England and Northern Ireland too. Winds will begin to ease and we'll see plenty of clear spells, so likely to turn rather chilly overnight, may even wake up to some pockets of frost. Still extremely windy across northern areas though, where we'll still have warnings in force as we head into Saturday for a time, but on the whole it's likely to be a slightly more settled day compared to Friday. Saying that though, we are eventually going to see some showers start to move in from the west. These could be quite heavy at times with some hail, also some thunder. May even see some winteriness across the hills as these move in, but across the very far east and southeast likely to remain dry and lighter winds compared to Friday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Aberdeenshire, the A93 is closed each way between Braemar and the Spittal of Glen Shee because of snow. The A1 in East Lothian is closed each way where a lorry's overturned in the winds between Dunbar and Coburn's Path, and the A1 also closed each way over the Tyne Bridge because of strong winds. The M2 in Antrim is blocked eastbound by a fallen tree between the M22 and Junction 5 at Temple Patrick, causing delays. A55 North Wales Expressway is closed in both directions over the Britannia Bridge to and from the Isle of Anglesey because of strong winds. On the M1 in Derbyshire, there's a lane closed northbound between junctions 28 and 29 near Mansfield for repairs, taking 3/4 of an hour in the queues. And on the M25 in Kent, 3 out of 4 lanes are closed anti-clockwise between junctions 3 and 2 from the M20 to the A2 after an accident and fuel spill, with long delays in both directions and as you divert.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 10:39. This is Britain's Newsroom with Ben Leo and Miriam Cates.
Morning. Thank you for your company. If you hadn't noticed, Storm Eowyn has hit. That's as forecasters flag a rare threat to life red weather warning.
Well, with us now with the latest is GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire. Tony, you're looking rather battered. How long is this storm predicted to go on for?
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm not quite sure. I feel like it could be in the middle of the afternoon, but I know it is only 20 to 11 in the morning. It's feeling like one of those days, these strong winds already reaching in excess of 88 miles an hour. These gusts potentially going up to 100 miles an hour. And indeed, we are now in Scotland's red weather warning, that huge spray of red on the map right across the central belt of Scotland. Quite a rarity for the southern part of Scotland to really experience such a huge weather event, and that's because Storm Eowyn has been come across, is still I believe going across Northern Ireland, and then the perfect channel of the Clyde Valley to guide the storm kind of through the central belt of Scotland over to the east coast in Edinburgh. We're expecting the red weather warning from the Met Office to last from 10 o'clock this morning through till 5 o'clock this afternoon, and already we're hearing reports of huge amount of storm damage, a lot of or temporary structures already bitten the dust, as it were. We've seen a fair few wheelie bins scoot their way by this morning, and I'm here on the Troon coast where we've taken in a few shots this morning, but just behind me you can see the front street of the harbour. It's already taking quite a pounding from the waves. It's about a few hours after the high tide today, and already the waters are still churning in as if it could as well be full tide. Now, across Scotland there's been widespread disruption. Schools pretty much across the Central Belt, hundreds of schools and nurseries closed today. Scotland's rail operator ScotRail has completely cancelled services across the country. Another matter also repeated by CalMac, with ferries going absolutely nowhere today. Messaging is stay home, stay safe, and don't be like me, stay inside.
Well, Tony, thank you very much. Just one quick question. You've mentioned that schools are closed. Is there any further advice over the weekend what people in the area should do?
Indeed, well, over the weekend, the red weather warning will disappear today, but that amber warning is going to linger for a little bit, covering, a bigger part of Scotland as well as the north of England. And then Sunday, there's expected to be another yellow weather warning just covering. And actually, if you go further up north, there's already another yellow warning about to come into place for snow in the Highlands. So it wouldn't be a British summer, or a British winter, if we didn't get absolutely everything all at once.
Tony, thank you so much, and please get indoors. You look in danger of being blown away there. Tony Maguire there. Wow, that's quite ferocious. I mean, it's not so bad in London. When I was coming out of Paddington Station this morning, I did get caught by a little gust, but nothing compared to that.
Yeah, I think we've escaped it in the south at least. It was quite bad at 2, 3 in the morning. I was woken up by heavy wind and rain, but I don't think anything on that scale as Tony's suffering, unfortunately. Some emails have come in. Druss, good morning. You say it's a shocking indictment that we don't, in fact, live in a democratic society when the vast majority clearly support the death penalty for such deserving individuals, but those in power refuse to act on it. I think that's in reference to your... You said, was it a poll or something saying that the majority of Brits do support...
I think I need to look it up, but I think most polls do suggest... I mean, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? We don't have referendums on everything, like they do in Switzerland, for example. They even have referendums on, what day should be bin day. But we don't do it like that. We elect individuals to Parliament who then make decisions, and they're supposed to become experts to be able to look at the pros and cons. But as Andrea Jenkins said, if this ever was a serious proposal, then perhaps it would be a massive referendum.
That's always my gripe with the... obviously, we live in a sense of a democratic society, but that's always been my gripe with Parliament, not just here, but all around the world, because MPs, and you'll know, being an ex-MP, they're whipped into line. They have to toe the party line. So, although on one hand people say, well, they're there to represent their constituents and they're part of the country, a lot of the time they're not. They toe the party line, which again is influenced by lobbyists and external agendas and groups and organisations.
Yes and no, because on the one hand, yes, sometimes the whipping system is anti-democratic. On the other hand, you are elected on a manifesto. Most people are voting for the party, not the person. That's absolutely clear from polling. And let's say the policy is to deliver Brexit, then that MP should absolutely vote to deliver Brexit on the whip, regardless of their personal beliefs, because that's what the manifesto said, and that's what people are expecting. So if you didn't have the whip in that situation, you wouldn't deliver on a manifesto, and that would be very anti-democratic. So I think, it's a difficult balance. Also, you get information as an MP that you don't get as an ordinary citizen. So a few years ago, the majority of people thought that you should be able to identify however you want, and you should be able to change your sex on your birth certificate. That was the majority view. But actually, because MPs in Parliament obviously got access to different studies and things like that, some MPs were able to stand up and say, no, hang on a minute, do you realise what that actually means? And we have seen public opinion change.
But we heard that...
So had we had a referendum at that point, should anyone be able to change their sex? Would have said yes. So it's a very difficult argument.
But we heard that kind of rhetoric from the experts during Brexit, about saying, well, we know more than you because we've got access to this information. You guys who want Brexit, you're just stupid because you haven't got access to this information. And I think it's kind of insulting to the electorate. But Brexit was a referendum.
And look at COVID. The public agreed. They wanted further and harder and harder and harder lockdowns. No. Now people think that was the wrong decision. But
not me.
Well, no, not you, but they were. We were in a minority. It's a very, very difficult thing.
Yeah, well, let us know what you think. Well, let us know what you think about that. gbnews.com/your say. We'll endeavour to read some more comments out fairly shortly. But now, after seeing that awful weather in Scotland, you may be in search of some winter sun. Here's the forecast for some top European holiday destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe. This includes Portugal, Spain and parts of northwest France. We're likely to see some heavy rain, also some strong winds at times. Largely settled across Tenerife, but Madeira, parts of Portugal, Spain, northwestern France could see some showers merging into longer spells of rain at times and also some strong winds. As we head further east, largely settled across Rome and also parts of Greece, but a chance we could see some showers here as we head into next week with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Jonathan, in London, we're hearing that there could be more posties from an Amazon point of view in order to limit or cut carbon emissions, but that they could put more people on foot delivering their parcels.
This is really interesting because more and more people now obviously are using Amazon and buying their shopping online or buying gifts online. And it's interesting that in London they're talking about putting their Amazon workers on foot. There are now parts of the country, I think Milton Keynes is one part of the country, where there's robots delivering parcels. Or
really?
You'll see these, well, they call them robots. You'll see these little things sort of bundling down the street.
Yes.
Sort of,
robots.
Yeah, I mean, technically they're a robot, but when I think of a robot, I think of a sort of...
A humanoid robot.
Yeah, sort of humanoid thing, sort of, Lost in Space style robot. But actually, they're sort of... little sort of carriages, little
droids,
boxes.
like
Yeah.
Star Wars droid type.
Well, they're not
thing.
even that. They're like a little sort of, they're like a box on wheels, delivering parcels in places like Milton Keynes and other bits of the country. So I think this is just another example of how the world is changing. Online shopping is completely changing the way in which we all live our lives, the way in things. The way
But
in
I
which
think
things are
Milton
delivered.
Keynes lends itself to something like that. This is a newly designed town. And
Exactly, that's why they're in Milton Keynes.
And
Yeah.
I really do think that a town like that really does lend itself towards a piece of tech like that. When I think back, our postie in Gloucestershire is a guy called Dave. He's fantastic. Everyone knows who he is. But I'm not sure that he could be replaced by one of these little droid things.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, just coming up to 10 to 11. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Ben Leo, and Miriam Cates.
Yes, a shock new report has found that children in England are 50 times more likely to suffer from so-called gender distress than a decade ago.
Who'd have thunk it?
Yes, what a surprise.
Exposing kids to sex and diversity and relationships and, even straight relationships, let alone other stuff. Just leave kids to be kids. Anyway, diversity and inclusion facilitator Katie John Went joins us now to discuss this. Good morning to you. Is this a surprise to you? Massive figures compared to, say, a couple of decades ago?
I could have written the same headline 15 years ago. I mean, I've been out 20 years and I was doing research in 2011 through to 2014. And these figures are based on like 2011 to 21, I think it is. And the figures in 2011 to 14 were regarded as a 5 to 50-fold underestimate then. So this is in some respect just playing catch up on what was always believed to be the underlying population. It's not as scary as it sounds, 50-fold massive increase, because partly the population has gone up massively in that era.
No. It's an increase per capita.
Yeah, the per capita increase is actually only about 30-fold, but either way, it's still massive.
Only,
but yeah, I know it's massive, absolutely. But if you then compare that to the number of GP surgeries or the number of kids in school, etc., it means that on average, it's about 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 GPs will ever meet a trans kid, a gender distressed kid, and of them, about 92% won't go on to hormones. So
it's completely normal. It's completely normal during puberty to experience discomfort, bodies changing, particularly for girls. Now, if you want to label that gender distress, then fine. But the problem that we've got is that because of the rise of social media, spreading ideas particularly, but also some of the materials in schools, DEI initiatives, we've had this very disturbing trend for children with very ordinary feelings during puberty to be told, oh, this means you've been born in the wrong body. Oh, this means you're actually a boy. And we've seen this lead to enormous harm, not only psychologically, but also sometimes irreversible physical harm, with children being put on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, ending up infertile, ending up with all sorts of problems. How are we going to put a stop to this?
Well, I agree in part that one of the bigger issues is the fact that it should be kind of grouped under the overall aspect of kind of body distress rather than gender distress, that it should be considered a kind of a subsection of body dysmorphia. I mean, I've met people who were born female who in their teens thought, oh my God, I think I'm a boy, but at 18 actually had things like a breast reduction, and actually then they felt better about their body, and actually it was about bodies, not about gender per se, and that's hence the shift from male to female being the dominant group of people expressing this. And during that same age, the advent of social media with body standards has been massive, and that has particularly affected, I think, girls more than boys in terms of identity around body, even if you separate that from gender per se. The other aspect is mental health. Over the same period, things like depression, anxiety, self-harm, eating disorders, autism diagnoses have all shot up by 10 multiple folds as well. So if you kind of group them together, the comorbidities of realizing that means that what we need to do is to invest in child and adolescent mental health, and the waiting lists to even be seen by CAMs, let alone gender clinics, etc., are really long indeed. And it should be kind of drawn out more broadly, which is what Hilary Cass said anyway, that we should be dealing with this in a more holistic way under mental health rather than specifically under gender identity.
Katie John, thank you for your company this morning. Appreciate it. I find the whole child trans thing just completely sad, absurd. Imagine telling a child there's something wrong with them.
And children are so susceptible. If they come to you with a problem and you tell them, oh, you must have an eating disorder, oh, you must have been born in the wrong body, oh, you must be this, of course they're going to accept that as an explanation. They're a child.
It's also deeply homophobic. A lot of these kids, young teenagers, are gay. And you've got clinics and experts, warped experts in my opinion, who are telling them, well, no, you're not gay, you're just in the wrong body, let's chop off your breasts.
Oh, don't go anywhere, plenty more to come.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Eowyn is set to bring a very unsettled day with very strong winds in places where we have multiple Met Office warnings in force, including 2 red warnings. These are covering Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland, where we're likely to see the strongest of the winds, could see up to 100 miles per hour here. It's going to be a windy day across the country, multiple warnings in force. Stay up to date on the Met Office website for those. Most of the rain clearing southern and central areas by the afternoon, becoming largely confined to the far north, where we see outbreaks of very heavy rain at times, also some snow mainly across the Scottish Highlands. Temperatures round about average for the time of year, but those strong winds are set to continue, particularly as we head into the evening. Lightening off across parts of the south, but in areas of the north we'll continue to see those heavy outbreaks of rain. Still some outbreaks of snow, mainly across hills, but we could see some to lower levels too. Very strong winds set to continue, particularly around coastal areas, but the rain set to ease across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England too. And once again across central and southern UK, most of the rain becoming fairly confined to the very far south east. But into the evening we could start to see some showers feed into western spots. Still the heavy rain continuing, becoming confined to the very far northeast of Scotland. We will eventually see winds ease away across central and southern areas, parts of northern England and Northern Ireland too. Winds will begin to ease and we'll see plenty of clear spells, so likely to turn rather chilly overnight, may even wake up to some pockets of frost. Still extremely windy across northern areas though, where we'll still have warnings in force as we head into Saturday for a time, but on the whole it's likely to be a slightly more settled day compared to Friday. Saying that though, we are eventually going to see some showers start to move in from the west. These could be quite heavy at times with some hail, also some thunder. May even see some winteriness across the hills as these move in, but across the very far east and southeast likely to remain dry and lighter winds compared to Friday.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Friday, January 24th, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Ben Leo and Miriam Cates.
We're asking, has justice been served to the Southport killer, Axel Rudikabana?
They sentenced him to custody for life
with a minimum term which he must serve in custody of 52 years, less the time he's served already.
Yes, 52 years behind bars for the horrific murders of the 3 little girls in Southport. Chief Crown Prosecutor Sarah Hammond gave her reaction to the case.
Many of the cases that we deal with have tragedy, difficulties and trauma, but this is one of the most harrowing that I, as the Chief Crown Prosecutor for this area, have ever come across.
Well, Reform UK MPs Rupert Lowe and Lee Anderson have called for a national debate on the death penalty as questions continue to be asked about the government's anti-terrorism prevent programme.
Did the Southport killer get the right jail term? The government says it can't impose a lifetime punishment, but Reform UK says bring back the death penalty. Who's right?
And Storm Eowyn batters Britain as a danger to life warning is issued by the Met Office. Hurricane force winds have reached 114 miles per hour in some parts of the country.
Yes, and planes are battling against the elements at Birmingham Airport as many flights are cancelled across the UK. We're seeing live pictures in Treduret Bay in Wales, where record high winds are being recorded too.
And a shock new report finds that children are 50 times more likely to suffer from so-called gender distress, no, me neither, than a decade ago. What's going on?
And the Mazda MX-5 RF convertible has been named as Britain's most loved car in an official survey. Do you agree? And on this topic of great Brits...
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Yeah, there he is, the man himself. It's 60 years today since Sir Winston Churchill died. Will we ever see a leader like him again in Britain? So, would we ever see a leader like Sir Winston again? One question that comes to my mind straight away is, how would Sir Winston stop the boats? That's a very, very good question. Well, it's something he never would have foreseen. He was interested in hiring boats to rescue people from Dunkirk, wasn't he? What a difference. I think he would have been strong. I think he would have stood up, strong deterrent. Turn them back.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about gender? Sir Winston on gender?
I think he knew the difference between men and women. I mean, think of a lot of former leaders. Margaret Thatcher, she would have surely said there's only 2 sexes. It does seem to be in recent years that our leaders have become infected with this DEI nonsense, quite frankly.
I think it's all going away. I said last year, I think we've got maybe 2 or 3 more years of all this woke DEI nonsense, all the gender nonsense before even big corporates, I think they will realise that most sane-thinking people don't give a damn about it and they'll just drop it all. And as we're seeing in America now, they're taking the first steps.
I think it'll be harder in this country because so much of it is embedded in our law, the Equality Act, Gender Recognition Act, Human Rights Act. I think Reform and the Conservatives are going to have a really interesting programme of repealing all that stuff. But nevertheless, I do think we've reached peak woke, hopefully.
Yeah, I think so. Let's pray. Big show coming up last hour, gbnews.com/your say. But first, your news headlines with she, her, Tatiana Sanchez.
Very good guess there, Ben. Thank you very much. The top stories: schools, rail services and hospitals are all set to be affected today when Storm Eowyn slams the UK. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 715,000 homes, farms and businesses are all without power across the Republic of Ireland today. A wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. Train operator ScotRail has also suspended all services across Scotland today, saying it would not be safe to operate. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 little girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for that attack in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alice da Silva Aguirre, B.B. King and Elsie Stankham were killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Ruda Cabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order, a punishment reserved for offenders aged 21 and or over, or, in rare cases, those aged 18 to 20. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Axel Ruda Cabana did not get a whole-life sentence because international law has prevented it.
The technicality of the whole-life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry, now the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
Meanwhile, a deal worth around £9 billion has been struck with Rolls-Royce by the government to help power Britain's nuclear submarines. The 8-year contract, dubbed Unity, is aimed at safeguarding 4,000 jobs and creating over 1,000 more, as well as bolstering national security and the UK economy. Defence Secretary John Healey said the agreement showed defence can be used as an engine for growth and a commitment to Britain's nuclear deterrent. The ministry estimates it'll save more than £400 million over the full 8-year period by making delivery more efficient and offering incentives to produce more for no increase in cost. In other news, the Court of Appeal has ruled that the 3 judges who oversaw family court proceedings related to the care of Sarah Sharif can be named next week. A judge had earlier ruled they couldn't be named due to a real risk of harm to them from a virtual lynch mob. The media were previously allowed to report that Surrey County Council had concerns about Sarah's father, Irfan Sharif, as early as 2010, and that Sarah was involved in 3 sets of family court proceedings before she was murdered by Sharif and her stepmother, Bainash Batul, at their home in Surrey. Sharif and Batul were jailed for life for the 10-year-old's murder in December, with minimum terms of 40 years and 33 years. US President Donald Trump has signed a handful of executive orders in the Oval Office, including documents related to 3 of the most consequential assassinations in US history, the killings of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed.
The grandson of former US President John F. Kennedy has criticised Donald Trump for ordering the release of thousands of classified files on his grandfather's assassination. President Trump had promised during his election campaign to make public the last withheld records on the case. However, JFK's grandson Jack Schlossberg hit back at the executive order, saying there was nothing heroic about it. He goes on to say the truth is a lot sadder than the myth, a tragedy that didn't need to happen. A woman whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to Sainsbury's will be sentenced later. Devika Rose had left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out in the evening in December 2021. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter. Rose and the children had been living in squalor before the tragedy. And a record number of children are living in B&Bs beyond the legal limit as England's homelessness crisis pushes councils to breaking point. MPs said there is a dire need for housing reform, with the lack of affordable homes forcing cash-strapped local authorities to hemorrhage their funds on temporary accommodation. The rising number of homeless households in England is making the situation anything but temporary. Length of stays increased significantly in many areas since 2021, with particularly long stays in London and the South East. The data shows 6,000 of these households included children, of which 2 in 3 had been living there for longer than the 6-week legal limit. Those are the latest headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Hello, good morning. Sorry, I was waiting for you, and you were waiting for me. This is Britain's Newsroom.
Both too polite.
On GB News, it's 11:10. I'm Ben Leo, and this is Miriam Kate.
Well, the Southport killer Axel Rudikabana has been jailed for life with a minimum term in prison of 52 years. This individual's punishment is thought to be the longest handed to a killer of his age.
Joining us now is GB News political editor Christopher Hope. Good morning, Christopher. What's the latest, please?
Morning, Ben. Well, we'll hear shortly from number 10 about the issues of the death penalty called for by Rupert Lowe and Lee Anderson from the Reform UK party, but only those so far amongst MPs in Parliament. And also whether the government can look at, as Kemi Badenoch would do, were she the Prime Minister, look at whether you can give under 18s a whole life tariff, lock people up and throw away the key. Now, we've heard from John Healey this morning. He's the Defence Secretary on GB News. He said there are limits on international law, UN law, that prevent us from having it in a court system that will impose unlimited sentences on under 18s. So the government says there's a UN duty we have. We all sign up to the UN, of course, and that means we can't lock up the Southport killer forever. And indeed, he'll be allowed, or can apply for parole after 50 or just under 52 years as things stand. And that's a live debate. An issue of the death penalty on the fringes of Parliament at the moment, pushed by Reform UK, is something also we'll hear more from the government. Elsewhere, there's a review into the Prevent programme. On my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast, I interviewed the former Security Minister from 2022 to 2024, Tom Tugendhat, about Prevent, and if he felt it should be scrapped. Here's what we had to say. Is it fit for purpose? Would you scrap it?
No, I wouldn't. I would improve it.
By?
Well, this is where I would look at the Shawcross report, and there's a huge amount in there that we were able to get done, and there's bits that we weren't able to get done because they take time to introduce. And part of it is about making sure you're triaging properly. So you're getting stuff in line in the appropriate way and you're responding appropriately. Because I'm afraid, I think there has been, by some people, there has been an attempt to balance these things. You know, we've got to be frank. You know, where the violence is coming from, the Islamist terrorism that we're seeing is really serious. Yes, of course, there's far-right terrorism. Yes, of course, there's so-called incel, you know, loner terrorism. This is why we need the inquiry.
We'll find out in the inquiry.
Exactly
I get it. Okay. Is criticising knife sales by Amazon a distraction? I mean, there are knives and kitchen drawers around the country.
Yeah, look, you know, we're never going to ban knives, right?
No.
That's never going to happen. So we need to get better at identifying triggers, as it were, on people and when people have radicalised themselves or been radicalised to find out where we're going. That's why the Prevent Act.
That's Tom Tugendhat there, the former security minister. He's there saying the Amazon criticism from the government is a bit of a red herring. He says we do need a triage service to look at people who are risky and to be firm and tighten up the Prevent programme, but don't scrap it.
OK, Chopper, thank you very much. The Prevent programme is another topic of discussion from Southport. I remember the Lion of London Bridge, Roy Larner, a bloke from Millwall in South London in Southwark. He was put on the Prevent programme after fighting off the Islamist terrorists in the London Bridge terror attack in July 2017. He fought them off bravely. As far as I remember, it was with a chair. He no doubtedly saved a lot of lives that night. And he was chucked onto a Prevent programme to ensure that he wasn't influenced by, again, the bogeyman far right. I mean, it's just absurd.
And then the murderer of David Amos, MP, we had his daughter on earlier in the week, Katie Amos, and she was telling us that his killer was on the Prevent scheme, but then was dropped due to an admin error. So obviously it does pick up some people, but there do seem to be some big holes in it. Well, moving on now, we're going to speak to legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg, who's joining us. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us. This is the longest sentence ever handed out to a person of Rudikabana's age. Is this what we were expecting?
I think it's higher than we were expecting. The starting point, according to my calculations, was 27 years. And so it's nearly... It is effectively a whole life order, although not literally, on the basis that once he reaches the age of, what will he be, 70, he will not be in any fit state to be released from prison, even if the parole board were to decide that he was safe to do so, because how would he possibly cope in the outside world after half a century in prison?
I don't think he'd be safe either if he did end up being released. What's your thoughts, please? Can I ask you on this conversation and the narrative about bringing back capital punishment?
Well, it's not something the government's going to do because the government has made it very clear. The Attorney General, Lord Hermer, is very committed to human rights. The UK is not going to leave the European Convention on Human Rights under the present government, and under the Human Rights Convention, the death penalty is not available. So it would mean leaving the Council of Europe, it would mean tearing up the Human Rights Convention, it would mean changing the law going back to the 1960s. There's absolutely no chance of it happening.
The complicating factor, of course, in this case was that Rudy Cabana was technically a child when he committed this crime. He was certainly a child when he was first referred to authorities. It seems that he was accessing extreme violent material, perhaps from the age of 11 or 12, so very much a child. In the UK, we have criminal responsibility from age of 10, but that differs very much in other countries. I think Sweden is something like 14. Do you think we've got it about right in this country in terms of how we progress children from childhood to adulthood, or do you think that's where perhaps some changes in the law might lie?
Well, I don't think there's much call for lowering the age of criminal responsibility in England and Wales below the age of 10. As you say, you have seen 10-year-olds prosecuted for murder. The two 10-year-olds who killed James Bulger in Liverpool, they were tried in an adult court. Thompson and Venables, they were called at the time. And so we do hold children responsible, as you rightly say, in a way that other countries don't. I think there are all sorts of questions to be asked about how the authorities reacted to what Rudy Cabana did when he was a child and a teenager, but I don't think there's any point in changing the law, and I don't really see how you can punish people for doing the sort of things that he did. Certainly he should have been prevented from going on to commit these appalling murders and the attempted murders, but whether he could have been prosecuted for what he was thinking of doing at the time is a much more difficult question.
OK, thanks very much for that. Appreciate your company this morning. Let's see what you've been saying on emails and gbnews.com/your say. Do you want to go first?
Yes, we've got Lee. Churchill would have sorted this mess out pronto. World War II, he had internment of his enemies, sunk the French fleet, etc. Everything to save Great Britain. Now we have Starmer.
Is that on the small boats? Would have sorted the small boats?
Potentially, yes, but maybe just everything, including this awful...
He just would have got it. He would have got it done.
Absolutely. Well, you know, these are such difficult questions, aren't they? Because if you know somebody is going to commit a crime, can you lock them up? That goes to the essence of what freedom means in this country, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Very, very difficult.
John has said, Miriam, where do you stand on the ECHR? Because the Tory party is never going to remove it and bring in a new bill of British human rights.
I think we have to leave the ECHR. I don't think it's possible to sort the migration crisis out without it. But I think that's going to have to be accompanied by quite a lot of other domestic law reform, because a lot of our own equalities law is embedded in the Human Rights Act, which puts the ECHR into law. It's all highly complex. So I do think we need massive reform. I would imagine that the Tory party will go into the next election committing to leave the ECHR. I think by then it'll be clear to everybody who calls themselves a Conservative that that is the only option.
Is that because Kemi won't be leader?
I assume Kemi will be there, but no, I think it should be so obvious that by the next, over the next year or two, it's going to become so clear that neither we nor our European allies actually can solve the immigration crisis without leaving it, because it's been so wrongly interpreted. Think what the situation it was written in when you had millions and millions of genuine refugees across Europe in the 1940s who'd experienced the most unimaginable horrors at the hands of a state. Then understandably we brought in laws to prevent states from persecuting people. That is not now how it's being interpreted, and I think everybody's waking up to that.
And also now, sticking with the ECHR, this debate maybe is not going to be as prominent as the small boats and migration, but the debate about capital punishment. We just heard from our guest there saying you'd have to leave the ECHR if you ever wanted to bring back capital punishment. Will this issue be a growing issue in the years to come, on top of the migration issue?
I was just thinking back, I don't know if you were even alive then in 1996, Ben, were you?
You're joking?
I don't know how, I have no idea how old you are.
89 I was born.
Oh my goodness,
I'm not that young.
You look a lot younger than you are.
I'm a child of the 80s.
Me too, at the other end though. But the horrendous massacre in the school in Dunblane by Thomas Hamilton killed 15, injured 60, I think, then killed himself. So the issue of the capital punishment was not brought up. But the reaction to that was, let's ban handguns, which did happen, and let's increase security around schools. So it's very much about how do we prevent this happening again, rather than looking at sentences.
Yeah.
So, you know, an interesting comparison.
Andy Murray, infamously, was at Dunblane, one of my tennis or sporting heroes at least. Anyway, we move on. Did you know the Mazda MX-5 RF convertible, sounds sporty, it's been crowned the most loved car in Britain. People must have seen this picture, Miriam, a few years ago. This is your motor, isn't it?
It is. That is our 1991 Mark I Mazda MX-5 convertible. It's such a fun car.
Top down in the summer, hair brushing in the breeze,
yeah.
tunes on. What's your tune of choice when?
Oh, you couldn't hear anything if you got the roof down, you can't hear a thing. So there's no point in having the music playing. Just the sound of the wind rushing through your hair.
Well, apparently this is Britain's most loved car. I'm not entirely sure. I could probably think of some others. I'll think during the break.
The thing is, it drives like a go-kart because it's not got a massive engine, 1.6, but because it's so light and rear-wheel drive. It's a heck of a lot of fun to drive.
Nice. Good to see you've stayed loyal to the car as well for such a long time.
Well, it's not on the road anymore. It needs quite a bit of fixing, but it will be one day. That's what we're promising ourselves.
All right, there we go. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Back in just a tick.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Yeah. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. Yeah. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so.
So GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wildish, the sign guy, can sort you out.
If you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, and we've got some breaking news. Wigan Council has voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. breaking with the Labour government's position.
OK, we're joined now by GB News reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, what's the latest on this?
Well, it's a motion brought forward by an independent councillor in Wigan. She actually tried to bring it forward on Wednesday evening, but as she delivered that motion calling for this national inquiry, the Labour councillors, I'm told, left the chamber. I've seen footage of them leaving the chamber. They said that the council meeting had run on for too long, so they ended it. However, after, I imagine, quite significant pressure in the local area, they did reorganise the motion for a full council meeting today, and the motion was voted through unanimously. So 64 Labour councillors, 10 independents and 1 Conservative, they've all voted in favour of calling for a national grooming gang scandal. So they will now write to the government on this. However, this local councillor, Maureen O'Byrne, the independent councillor who pushed forward this motion, they voted against her being able to speak on the motion before the vote. And she refers in the speech to some of the appalling sentencing remarks from one of the Oxford grooming gangs that was jailed in 2013. Perhaps there were concerns about hearing those details. I don't know. I've not heard a response on why that motion wasn't heard, but it was voted against having her speak, but they have voted unanimously in favour of that motion, breaking with the government's position.
Charlie Peters, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be hearing more on this. I mean, this really undermines, Ben, doesn't it, the government's position that there should be local inquiries, if even local authorities recognise that that's inadequate.
Yeah, so what are the implications of this? Is it going to put any pressure on Sir Keir Starmer, on Yvette Cooper, the Labour government? Do they care? Do they care?
Well, it will have to, and it does seem, given how implicated so many local authority councillors and officers are in this scandal, it does seem ridiculous that these inquiries should be locally led, because how can anybody local be objective about this? Even if they themselves had nothing to do with it, they will know and be in professional relationships with many people who might be implicated.
For me, it's just another example of how the Prime Minister, I mean, he's top of the chain, so I'll name him, how this Labour government just don't seem to get it. They don't get the mood of the nation. The people, and forget the people, the victims want a national inquiry. We keep hearing from these Labour types, the most important people in this are the victims. OK, listen to the victims. They want a national inquiry. It shouldn't be for the likes of Wigan Council and Labour councillors to put pressure on the government. They should get it. They should understand and feel the mood of the nation and just do it.
Well, they're well done to Wigan Council, because those Labour councillors have obviously broken with quite a firm national line, so they've been brave.
Now more Labour MPs, please, do the same. Take some inspiration from your colleagues in Wigan.
Well, we're now joined by GP and medical writer Dr Renee Hodekamp and political commentator I'm mixing my words today, Judita De Silva, here in the studio to discuss the news. What shall we start with? How about this, the gender crisis? So a 50-fold rise in children with gender distress. Doesn't this just follow the same pattern of children with anxiety, with self-harm, all these kind of things?
So the one thing that we know is that most of these children who are expressing dissatisfaction with the body that they find themselves in is that they have high levels of ADHD, autism, self-harm, anxiety. Now, the answer to all of those things for many children is always to look for another solution. When they go online and they question just once, I'm feeling like this, they get dragged down an algorithm very, very quickly that suggests to them that the answer to all of their problems is to change their sex, their gender. Now, the issue that we have here is that as professionals, we had this many years ago when we saw lots of teenage girls with anorexia. And if I saw a young girl with anorexia who said, I'm fat, I wouldn't affirm her belief. I wouldn't say to her, you are a bit chubby, let me give you Ozempic. I would actually work it through, do some Ozempic, find out what was going on. We have not done this with these children. It's been quite the opposite. They've just been told they're right. And there is a very, very vicious, and I've seen it at work, there's a vicious net out there ready to catch them. But coincided with all of this mental anguish, we know that phones have made our teenagers more anxious, more unhappy and more disconnected from the world than they have ever been. The two are connected.
Do you think that that's the case?
I think it's kind of
if you are more meta about the way you look at it, it's like it's a two-pronged issue. I do agree that at such a young age, you're confused about absolutely everything, and you should be turning to adults for guidance, not complicity. But at the same time, I think what is happening is that this whole movement is fueled by older people in the community who had very difficult lives getting to being who they truly feel they are. But you cannot impose the awareness and the development you have of older age, knowing the whole landscape of being transgender and transitioning to a child. It's just something that like the community has to give on a little bit and accept that at such a young age you can't start the transition in the hope of when you are older you have the full experience of being truly the kind of look you want to have.
That is a very interesting dynamic, actually. This whole movement is being fuelled by adult men who want to be seen as women for a variety of reasons. And it is, unfortunately, attracting teenage and prepubescent girls to think that they should actually be boys. It's a very odd dynamic.
It is, but we also mustn't forget in this, there are also gay teenage boys who are being convinced that actually they're not gay, they're girls. And I have seen this to its fruition with a teenager having full sex surgery. And I am scarred by that because I have sat and known that I'm just dealing with a gay man. This is almost the ultimate conversion therapy. And gay people should be worried.
I'm worried that there's people on either side are so entrenched, there's no meeting in the middle, which is where the problem, I think, begins.
I don't think there is any meeting in the middle of mutilating children.
Yeah.
There's no
I agree that at that age,
negotiation.
they say your frontal lobe isn't fully developed until you're 25. So you shouldn't be making decisions with this gravity so early. But I do think that in the spectrum of issues that children have, conversations need to be open and remove that sense of fear and shame so that it also gives adults the awareness of the kind of world they live in where all of these things exist.
I think when you have classrooms of 30 children where 17 of them are non-binary or trans, you know it's contagion. Because it's not possible. It's just not possible.
Yeah, it would be good if damaged adults wouldn't put their baggage, their emotional baggage on young kids. Just leave them alone.
Way to say it, Ben. They're not damaged adults. They're adults speaking with a certain experience they feel might offer an ease of transition to those who could be similar.
No, they are damaged. They suffer gender dysphoria.
But unfortunately, there are all sorts of very, very bad actors in this, particularly online, who are literally grooming children.
But don't tar everyone with the same brush, because I do know that a lot of trans people, because of what they've lived, you try to live in a way that might help others to not suffer the same way you did.
Well, let's move on to something entirely less serious, which is Britain's favourite car, apparently, and I'm absolutely delighted by this, that the MX-5 is Britain's favourite racer.
A Japanese model. Japanese cars are, I think, for reliability, for style. There's Miriam's.
That's mine. It's not the latest version. In fact, it's a Mark 1. It even has the flippy headlights, but I couldn't find a picture of it with the headlights up.
I have to confess that this is my other half's favourite car. And about 10 years ago, I was looking for a sporty car, and he tried to convince me to buy one of these, and I found it just a tiny bit too small. So I actually went for the BMW X4, Z4, which I have to say was my most favourite car ever. I thought she was beautiful, and then I got pregnant and she had to go.
Yeah, well, that was our only car before we had children.
Exactly.
And I remember, you couldn't even fit a suitcase in the so-called boot. We went on holiday packing in Tesco bags. Literally.
Yeah, that's the price of looking sexy. The things that even though it's like oddly, I was in the commercial for the Mazda MX-5 years ago. I actually was. But I do say, like, next to Japanese cars, I always rate German cars. When it comes to reliability, you go for German cars. But then, I mean, Japanese people know how to make a great vehicle.
Yeah, and can I just say, what a shame what's happened to Jaguar Land Rover. Not just the white rebrand, but, they've outsourced production to Tata in India. And reliability, I have to say, not a good reputation. The amount of times I drive down the motorway and there's a Range Rover or a Discovery on the back of a recovery truck.
Yeah.
Shame. A once great British brand, outsourced.
What's your favourite car, ladies?
Mine sticks with the Z4.
Mine, Aston Martin DB9.
Oh,
of course it is.
Expensive taste. Well, thank you both so much for that. And next up, we've got news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you very much. We start with some breaking news that Wigan Council has voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, breaking with the Labour government's position on it. The local authority, which is Labour-led, unanimously voted through a motion requesting that a full national inquiry is undertaken. That motion said the abuse had destroyed the lives of tens of thousands of teenage girls, adding that an inquiry would provide justice for the young girls who have suffered and identify preventative measures moving forwards. More on this breaking story at the top of the hour. Elsewhere, millions of people have been urged to stay at home as 100-mile-per-hour winds pose a danger to life and cause travel disruption across the UK. Schools, rail services and hospitals are all set to be affected today when Storm Eowyn slams the country. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 715,000 homes, farms and businesses are all without power across the Republic of Ireland today. A wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. And the Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 little girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year, when he was 17 years old. Alice de Silva Aguirre, B.B. King and Elsie Dot Stankham were killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudakabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole life order, a punishment reserved for offenders aged 21 and over, or, in rare cases, those aged 18 to 20. Defence Secretary told DB News Axel Rudakabana did not get a whole life sentence because international law prevented it. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, up at noon, we've got Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily. They're joining us here in the studio. So what's coming up on your show, guys?
Well, of course, a lot more on the weather that is sweeping the country, the red warnings that Northern Ireland are facing, risk to life, all the rest of it. But also, have you heard the phrase plant-based dictatorship?
No, but I can imagine what it means.
That is what many councils across the country have been accused of hoisting upon their own electorates, thanks to these meat-free policies, where it's actually getting harder and harder, particularly on council-controlled property, to find any meat at all. The Countryside Alliance have launched a campaign.
Yeah, guess who's having to fight back yet again? It's the farming community.
Oh, yes.
It's the countryside people who say, you know what? You're just a council. You don't get to control my diet.
I visited a dairy farm when I was an MP and, listened to how they, looked after their cows and everything like that. And I said, what's the biggest threat to British farming? Thinking they'd say environmental policies, isn't it? Vegans.
Yeah, well, I think veganism is going a bit out of fashion.
It is, yeah.
It's strange because it doesn't really make sense.
The councils are a few years behind.
In terms of it's more of a moral position than even an environmental one. I mean, it's sort of if it's an animal produce. I mean, who has a problem with cheese? I mean, really?
Yeah. Vegans.
Well, talking of green councils, I remember when Brighton and Hove City Council was run by a green administration, and they had the worst recycling rates in Europe.
They did. Rubbish piled high on the streets.
Piling high in streets, filthy.
Veganism has destroyed vegetarian menus as well, because now you can't get something that's meat-free but has cheese.
That's
and
absolutely right.
So
my mum ordered a vegan stroganoff the other day. She regretted it.
Yeah, exactly.
I bought a pizza this week that didn't... It was called cheese on it, not cheese, because they're not allowed to call it cheese if it's vegan. It was cheese.
Well, at least, they didn't spell it right.
Because I've got a friend who was doing something called veganuary, and I just panicked. I didn't have anything to feed him. So
you have a friend who did veganuary?
I do, yeah. It's all coming out now.
Well, we've got all that and more up at midday.
Yes, but coming up, children exposed to screen time apparently suffer more with their vocabulary, communication, writing, numeracy and letter fluency. You should know a lot about this, Miriam. You're quite keen on starving kids of screen time.
Absolutely.
Is that the right phrase, starving them? I agree with it.
Yes, well, or about ending the screendemic. I think that's someone phrased it.
I don't. My kids watch telly when he gets back from school or whatever, but I'd never allow them to sit there scrolling on a phone.
Yeah, exactly. There's a difference between watching telly and doom scrolling all day.
Yeah,
Isn't it? Anyway, that's up next. Stay with us on Britain's Newsroom.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The Republic of Ireland recorded its strongest wind gust on record because of Storm Éowyn, and for Northern Ireland, the strongest winds since 1998. And those winds are now moving into Scotland, so winds continuing to pick up across the central belt with the risk of 80 to 90 mile per hour gusts, and in some of the most exposed spots, 100 mile per hour gusts for parts of Northern Ireland into central and southwest Scotland during the afternoon. Now, as the afternoon progresses, the strongest sway the winds will push north, associated with the band of rain and hill snow for Scotland. Brighter skies elsewhere, and actually much less windy for England and Wales. There will be some cloud and some outbreaks of rain towards the far southeast. Otherwise, a largely more settled end to the day for England and Wales. Just a few showers about, but for central and northern Scotland, well, the winds will continue to increase into the evening as the storm shifts north. So we can expect gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour wind gusts before the day is out for the far north of Scotland. Northern Ireland, by this stage, the worst is over. England and Wales, as I say, it's going to be much less windy by the end of the day. Some showers moving through Wales and the southwest. That could lead to a few gusty winds in places, but overall the winds are easing overnight for England and Wales, as well as central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. The worst will be over by this stage. Showers and some snow falling out of those showers in the north because it's going to be a cold start to Saturday. Widespread frost, some patches of ice around as well. Amber warning for northern Scotland expires Saturday morning, and so the winds by this stage are coming down, and the strongest winds, the gales, are largely confined to the far north of Scotland. Elsewhere, a bright enough day with lighter winds for England and Wales, further showers and blustery winds coming into Northern Ireland and western parts later, and then another low comes on Sunday, not quite as bad as Éowyn.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. 11:42, Ben and Miriam with you on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News.
Well, a study has revealed the damage done to children under 2 who are spending more than 1.5 hours a day plastered to their screens.
Yes, concerns are rising as many children's development has been stunted in areas of communication, numeracy and vocabulary too.
Well, specialist speech and language therapist Sandy Chappell joins us now. Sandy, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is a really shocking finding, isn't it? That toddlers who are watching screens, I assume phones, iPads, TVs, are actually seriously behind in their language development and communication, even by the time they start school.
Absolutely. I'm a member of a group called Health Professionals for Safer Screens, and we now believe that this has become a real crisis in child development. And the main problem is that parents are largely unaware of the harms that devices are doing to their young children. So we have written to the UK Chief Medical Officers asking for an urgent public health campaign to raise awareness about this. Because like you say, children are starting school now with really poor language skills, and that will impact them throughout their time at school. I mean, some teachers are reporting that children are arriving at school unable to even respond to their own name. And that's something we would expect of a 9-month-old baby.
Yeah.
So it really is a severe problem.
And also separately, just to add to that, some children going to school still in nappies. I mean, it seems to be a bit of a parenting crisis. Can I ask you, is there ever a safe amount of time for kids to watch television? My boy comes home from school and maybe we'll watch 30, 40 minutes on the TV to wind down, I guess. Is that ever okay?
Well, as a group, we've developed guidelines. Our group is made up of GPs, paediatricians, optometrists, people like me, and the guidelines we have set based on evidence and our own views are under 2s, no screen time at all, because under 2s have been shown not to learn anything from screens. Children aged 3 to 5, we're recommending no more than half an hour a day, and that includes TV time, because anything more than that, and you're taking away from time that children could be spending playing, chatting with their parents, reading, going outside. So, yeah, if parents can keep within those guidelines or try and reduce screen time to eventually achieve them, that's the aim.
There's a suspicion also that screen time, particularly scrolling on devices, smartphones and tablets, is actually really inhibiting children's development of impulse control. So they find it very difficult to have patience, to delay gratification, to not receive anything now. Have you seen that as well in your practice?
Absolutely. I mean, I talk to parents on a daily basis about trying not to use devices as a digital dummy. It's so easy when a child is having a tantrum in the supermarket. If you hand over a phone, they can almost instantly seem happy. But then they fail to be able to learn how to control their emotions. And reception class teachers are really struggling with lots of children in the classroom who haven't learned to regulate their own emotions and are having meltdowns in class as a result. So I think we need to accept that we are using devices as dummies or as babysitters. There's very little on there for young children that's actually educational or beneficial in any way.
Sandy Chappell, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this very, very pressing problem.
Well, you made the point during the break that there's a societal thing now where parents feel it's just not acceptable because of pressure from strangers or people on a train or in a supermarket to have children making a noise in public and crying and maybe that's why parents feel pressured to say,
I think it's
there you go.
Exactly. I think it's a vicious circle. On the one hand, now that we do have these devices in our pockets, it's tempting to give it to your child if they're crying, to amuse them while you're doing something boring like shopping. But then also, the looks that I've seen young mothers get with crying babies from strangers in train carriages, when the children are behaving as children, totally normal. We need to be much more accepting of the normal kind of noise that children make and not try and shut them up with screens. But I do think so many parents, particularly of young children, babies to 2 or 3, just don't realise how harmful it is to a child's brain to be glued to a screen rather than taking in language and noise and observation from the world.
Go out and play some sport, take them on their bike or
and the brain at that
puzzles.
age is between 6 months and 2 years. That is the time when the brain learns language. If you don't get exposure to as much language as you should in that period, you'll never learn it. That's how serious it is.
Yeah, interesting. I was under the assumption that some screen time for, say, 5, 6-year-olds, my boy is 5, was maybe beneficial because you're learning things.
If you sit there and talk to them about it, it can be.
Jude, my boy watches something on the BBC iPlayer called Number Blocks. It's about counting.
That's awesome.
And
I like
so
that, yeah.
He's not... I don't want him sitting there watching inane YouTube videos.
I think that counts as educational.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Got away with it.
Think so.
There we go.
Anyway, we've got to go. Weather's awful. So here is some places in Europe where you can find some sunshine.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast. Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe. This includes Portugal, Spain and parts of northwest France. We're likely to see some heavy rain, also some strong winds at times. Largely settled across Tenerife, but Madeira, parts of Portugal, Spain, northwestern France could see some showers merging into longer spells of rain at times and also some strong winds. As we head further east, largely settled across Rome and also parts of Greece, but a chance we could see some showers here as we head into next week with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lately, it's getting much better. The people getting more educated in terms of overall well-being of the skin health rather than temporary aesthetic treatments. Because most of the treatments in aesthetic, it doesn't change the texture of the skin. It just gives like volumetric result or remove the wrinkles temporarily.
So what are the most popular treatments that people are after?
According to a statistic report, first is anti-wrinkle, then dermal filler, then energy-based device. Yeah. But lately, biostimulators also became very popular. And
what do you mean by biostimulators?
Biostimulator, any substance that can change the texture of the skin, or like it will lead to postpone the aging process, or proliferate more collagen, increase the elasticity of the skin, such as polynucleotide or exosome, or different vitamins and minerals in a form of mesotherapy considered as a biostimulator.
Turkey's a particularly popular destination because the costs are so much lower. There have also been a lot of horror stories about what can happen when things go wrong, even people dying from post-surgery complications. What would you advise people?
Choose as a practitioner or surgeon very carefully and never prioritize price over quality. This is your face after all, your body after all. And mistakes can be reversible. It can be irreversible, and sometimes it's not like a booking restaurant or hotel. It's a sensitive matter that can affect their confidence and skin and body for life. Yeah. So they need to choose very wisely. They need to search what kind of methodology that particular surgeon, they perform the treatments. Are they using any safety tools?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Let's go straight to Northern Ireland, where Doogie BC is braving Storm Éowyn. Doogie, what's the latest? Are you okay?
We are fine here. The gusts are still here, but I mean the main part of the storm has moved out towards Scotland. Now comes the cleanup. You'll see behind me here this road that was covered in trees. The locals have managed to clear that. The only thing they can't clear, obviously, is if you look down into these trees, you'll see the power down, straight down in, and then if you go over the other side of that, there's a huge transformer, and what that really means is there's probably about 100 houses or so on the other side of that transformer that are without power, and that has become a problem in Northern Ireland. And although the cities is where the main population is, it's really the rural areas they're getting hit with this type of disturbance and real structural damage that causes real problems for people getting about the infrastructure that is smaller than the cities. So that cleanup will happen today, tomorrow and the next day. The Northern Ireland Electricity Service are really doing their best to attend things like this, but if you're near these cables, please just don't go near them because they could still be live. So
Yep.
Northern Ireland is in clean-up mode at this minute in time.
Great stuff. Thanks, Doogie. And thoughts and prayers, to turn a phrase, with Scotland, which I think appears now to be suffering.
In the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
I always used to wonder why they have so many power cuts in America, because all their cables are overhead. Anyway, that's it from Britain's Newsroom. Up next, we've got Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily.
Yes, coming up yesterday, we saw the life sentencing of Axel Riddle-Kana, the Southport killer. But are you satisfied that we understand enough about the motivations behind that killer? Why did he target little girls and women?
And of course...
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Eowyn is set to bring a very unsettled day with very strong winds in places where we have multiple Met Office warnings in force, including 2 red warnings. These are covering Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland, where we're likely to see the strongest of the winds. Could see up to 100 miles per hour here. It's going to be a windy day across the country, multiple warnings in force. Stay on the Met Office website for those. Most of the rain clearing southern and central areas by the afternoon, becoming largely confined to the far north, where we see outbreaks of very heavy rain at times, also some snow mainly across the Scottish Highlands. Temperatures round about average for the time of year, but those strong winds are set to continue, particularly as we head into the evening. Lightning off across parts of the south, but in areas of the north we'll continue to see those heavy outbreaks of rain. Still some outbreaks of snow, mainly across hills, but we could see some to lower levels too. Very strong winds set to continue, particularly around coastal areas, but the rain set to ease across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England too, and once again across central and southern UK, most of the rain becoming fairly confined to the very far south east. But into the evening we could start to see some showers feed into western spots. Still the heavy rain continuing, becoming confined to the very far northeast of Scotland. We will eventually see winds ease away across central and southern areas, parts of northern England and Northern Ireland too. Winds will begin to ease and we'll see plenty of clear spells, so likely to turn rather chilly overnight, may even wake up to some pockets of frost. Still extremely windy across northern areas though, where we'll still have warnings in force as we head into Saturday for a time, but on the whole it's likely to be a slightly more settled day compared to Friday. Saying that though, we are eventually going to see some showers start to move in from the west. These could be quite heavy at times with some hail, also some thunder. May even see some winteriness across the hills as these move in, but across the very far east and southeast likely to remain dry and lighter winds compared to Friday.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,